Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke Pace, and I'm joined by first-time guest Eric, the Viper Pozun. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. We're going to be covering quite a bit. You have a pro fight coming up, so it's always exciting for 247 Fighting Championships BITB11, 11, which is April 16th at Monroeville Convention Center. So we obviously want to get there. You're fighting Jake Schilling, who's kind of a known commodity in the Pittsburgh area. A lot of people know him, so that's going to be a great fight to talk about. But I want to go all the way back to pandemic 2020. In November, right before Thanksgiving, you fought on a very unique card. It was BITB11 4. I was cage side, but otherwise it was a completely empty Monroeville Convention Center. And you fought a really great opponent, really great fight. Let's start there. I know it was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. What was it like fighting Colin Caprini? You got the win by decision. It was a very entertaining fight, probably fight of the night that night, and just a fantastic fight. So what was that fight like for you? How was it fighting in a completely empty crowd, no crowd whatsoever, empty building? Kind of talk us through that from November of 2020.
Yeah, I've never had so many different things happen leading up to a fight like that. I remember Monday, the week of the fight, they were saying that we're going to reduce the ticket. We're not going to have that many people. And it was like, okay. Then the next day it was like, we might not have an event at all. And then it just kept going from there and there. And then I think I was cutting weight in the sauna on Thursday and they gave me a call and I was like, oh no, this is like the call of death. I'm like, it's something's happened, not good. And they lost their main event. So on we got bumped all the way up to main event. There was no audience. It was like all this stuff. And it was actually really cool. I enjoyed it, not fighting in front of an audience. It's definitely very different, atmosphere wise. You can hear everything. You can hear the corner, you can hear their corner, you can hear the commentators. There's not too much that doesn't get heard. And for a tough guy like Colin, he had to really be dialed in with that. And that was a really big turning point for myself to be able to have all these things happen that weren't ideal and go out there and fight a good fight against a great opponent and get the win.
And it was a great fight, the main event on a card that hopefully we'll never see like that again, because obviously it was but what I really loved about that card and being one of the few people allowed in and to be able to be part of that really unique card, there's actually two cards like that right back to back there, was the fact that you used the word dialed in, that the fighters, it was real. Even though there's times where you could have a louder sparring session and training, a few more people cheering, it was real. And what happens in MMA is when it's sanctioned and the doctors are there and everybody's there and the refs there and the judges are there, it counts for all the marbles. And I think we've seen at the UFC level, they were having it in empty events. In the big time UFC heavyweight championship between DC and Stipe was fought in the Apex, for goodness sake. But I think it really showed. I think it really showed just the power of when it's on, and when it's real, it's real. And it's not a matter of 30,000 fans screaming or a couple thousand fans. It's a matter of being able to perform when you need to. And I think that's something we've seen all the way back to the Ultimate Fighter, which was super. There's not a lot of people cheering at the Ultimate Fighter either. And now they're doing it for Dana White Contender Series. Those are big fights for the Dana White Contender Series. Guys, there's nobody there. It's like 10 people. And so I think we're seeing in MMA that it's important to perform when it counts, even if there's 10 people in the room. So maybe one day you'll be on Dana White Contender Series, Tuesday night Contender Series, and you'll be like, oh, I'm used to this, from that experience. You ended up right from that fight. Of course, 10 months went by. The pandemic continued, all that stuff. You ended up having your pro debut in October. So a few months from maybe 6 months ago now. You got stopped by a KO, TKO. Nobody wants that to be their pro debut. What did you take from it positively? You lost in round one. So I don't really know what that fight looked like. It wasn't for 247, but how did you come out of that? as far as, give yourself time to reflect on it, and what have you learned for going forward from a tough debut at the pro level?
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, I fought a very good prospect out of Tiger Schulman's in New York, in New Jersey. So I went from fighting in front of nobody to fighting in front of, everybody in Atlantic City. That was about as good of a giant step up as I could get at this level. And so, yeah, it didn't come away as a win. But when I look back on that fight and knowing that, I kicked his knee and my leg went dead, and that's how he ended up finishing me. And being able, like, he just knocked somebody else out in like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
and
just looking at it.
Yeah, he's very good. And being able to know that, like, you know what, at that level, and like very, very outside the States, I feel good. And it takes a second to get your feet wet in that kind of atmosphere. So I take it as like a trial run.
Sure.
Get used to like that kind of atmosphere, feel the pressure, feel all the different emotions, when you're being backstage and in the cage and everything else. The fight week, just getting all of that in there was incredibly invaluable.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I think part of being well coached and being honest with yourself is if you want to have a perfect career with no kind of challenges, don't be an MMA fighter, right? Like there's going to be challenges that come along. You've learned from it. A pro debut is a pro debut. You're fighting obviously tougher guys, but it's also the environment, the way the rounds are, the whole thing. It's good that you can look back at that. And obviously for you, it's kind of a good thing that he's gone on and knocked out the next guy in 31 seconds, and maybe he'll one day be in the UFC. Because I think sometimes when you look back on your early pro career, you need those tough tests early. So that way you kind of make those adjustments. We've seen people get to the UFC. I've interviewed a lot of people off Dana White Contender Series, which I brought it up again. It's a great show. But I've seen guys that are 5-0, 6-0 at the regional level at pro, and then they never get another win because they just haven't been competing against tough talent. So it is great that you've had that. And so that way, you're kind of increasing your game early as opposed to 10 fights from now trying to figure it out. A guy who's had a ton of experience, and you're going to be fighting him in a few weeks here, is Jake Schilling. And he's well known in the Pittsburgh MMA because it looks like he had close to 15 amateur fights. And then now you'll be his fourth pro fight. What about Jake made this fight make sense? He's 2-1 as a pro. You're obviously 0-1 as a pro. So he's in his fourth pro fight. You're in your second pro fight. What do you think is good about this fight versus Jake? And then obviously, how are you feeling going into that fight?
It just came down to timing, really. I was looking to fight around this time, and I had been working on some things from my previous fight, and just had the time to build your game. You reflect on everything and like be excited to get back in there and challenge myself. And they offered this one. We looked at the tape, and I'm excited to go into Pittsburgh and fight someone. That's all it comes down to.
Well, listen, I'm excited that you're excited, and obviously a pro fight's a pro fight. Doesn't matter if you're fighting in a different state. In this case, someplace you fought before, which is good. I also think it's really nice, and you see this a lot at the regional level, where fights are just really about the opportunity to fight the other person. It doesn't really happen to the higher level where the Chael Sonnens and the Kobe Covingtons, really come out, because it really doesn't have to be a personal beef or a vendetta. You're just fighting an opponent to see that night if you can beat him. And that's really what pro MMA is about, is being better than your opponent when you fight. So I think that's always nice. And a lot of the buildup you see at the pro level where they're selling pay-per-views, it becomes like a personal attack. What would you want to see out of yourself that night, April 16th? Is really isn't about Jake. It's much more about what the Viper does in there, particularly in the pro ranks.
Yeah, I really just want to show what I've been working on. I've put a lot of time into this just sport, period, and just getting like the mental side totally down and feeling good and ready and excited. I've never really been super excited to fight. I can't really think of it except maybe the Caprini fight,
Hmm.
just because the things that were going on leading up to it was like, this is what we do. This is what I need to, um, you know, this is how the fight goes. Things aren't perfect. You got to make it happen. And like looking at it now, it's the same kind of thing. You know, I'm excited to get in there. I've never been like that, so it'll be good.
Well, it's good that you're reflecting on sort of your mindset, connecting back to the Caprini fight, because everything that week could have become a mental loss, up here, from losing the fans to thinking that the fight's over. I can't even tell you the number of, and you were still amateur at the time, the number of fighters, both amateur and pro, I've seen stop their weight cut, stop their diet, stop their training, whatever it is, at the first rumor that something's gone wrong. And you just can't do that. You have to, we've seen it at the highest level, at the lowest level. You have to keep going, because fights fall through at the last minute, but fights also are put together at the last minute. I mean, Aquina got a title shot versus Habib Nurmagomedov because he was the only guy on weight at that weight
Right.
class. And he put on a heck of a fight. So I think a lot of times it comes down to the mental discipline of the week of continuing the focus, continuing the drive. Then the event happened and you got a huge win. So obviously that's good to kind of get back in your mind. It's been great having you on the show. I believe this was, like I announced at the beginning, your first time on. I've interviewed you in the cage at 247, but I think this is the first time you come on the show. So I'm super thankful for you coming on the show. Speaking of gratitude, who do you want to thank? Whether it's personally, professionally, the gym, friends, whoever, like who's kind of in your team, whether they're in your corner physically the night of, or just in your corner in life.
I'm truly so grateful that I have so many great coaches and role models around me in my life that have been able to pick me up and keep me moving forward and growing and everything like that. Obviously, Devontae with the traveling circus and George at Revolution Fight and Fitness. I mean, those guys have been for the last, God, my whole career, and for the last couple of years, really just been putting the finishing, sharpening everything up and making me ready for this. So those are my guys, and I'm extremely grateful. I get to go to a bunch of different gyms in the Ohio area. There's way too many, but I appreciate all of them for all of the different work, and it's very nice. Makes me happy to be able to train with a bunch of very talented people.
Well, that is a great gratitude list, and really to connect to something that I think is super important for people to realize is that you're benefiting from a whole culture of gyms, a whole variety. That also happens in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of cross training in your area. In Ohio, you're picking up a lot of skills, and you're not just because of one trainer or one coach or one fighter. It's a collection. There might be trainers and fighters and coaches that have more influence, but you can pick up something from somebody you've sparred or trained with or rolled with one time that ends up coming to help you in the future. So I think that's really helpful when people that are fans realize that the fighter you see in there is by themselves, but they're really a collection of everybody that's coached them, trained them, rolled with them, whatever it is. I heard it once say, a pro fighter said after a fight, if I've ever punched you, or you've ever punched me, that thank you, because that's a whole process of the sport. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Can't wait to see how entertaining Brawl in the Berg 11. People should be getting either tickets directly from you or from people at the gym if they're going to make the drive in. If not, the pay-per-view will still be happening, and I believe you can select the fighter on the pay-per-view. So 247fighting.com is where they can get the pay-per-view, or make the trip into Monroeville Convention Center. Would be fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show. Can't wait to see what type of entertainment you put on. Thanks again, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.